That's the kind of terrible relationship the previous owner of this body had with her father. If you want to know more about her, get comfortable, grab your popcorn, and get your ears ready. So, the heroine of the love story, her lovers. The hall in which the dinner is being held, a duke is seated. He's eating, and a servant girl comes up to him. She says, "The young lady has arrived." A girl in a beautiful red dress with a green bow on the back enters the room where the dinner is being held. The duke said Melissa was late. When she said that, he didn't even look at her, and he said nothing more. The girl, when she came in and sat down at her chair, she replied that she was always late. So the story begins with the commoner Yuri being universally recognized by one baron due to her abilities in magic. In the course of the play, she takes 4 handsome men into her harem. You're looking at the crown prince, the gunslinger, a werewolf, a billionaire. Undoubtedly all of them are fascinated by the protagonist. Why? Well, maybe it's because she's beautiful and kind, like an angel coming down from heaven. What is more important in this novel? There is also an antagonist, is the fiancée of the crown prince. Shooter's older sister, werewolf-hating, major troublemaker, stick-in-the-mud rich guy, Melissa Potterbrat. And now back to where we left off, the lunchroom. Melissa is a bitch who has a nasty relationship with everyone. So we can see why her family's like this. The room is quiet. Everyone's eating. Melissa tries to eat the soup, but it's too fatty for her, and she doesn't like it very much. So the soup comes out of her mouth. A maid comes up to her saying that she has spilled it all. The mistress has a hole in her mouth. The maid moved closer to wipe her mouth and told her what she would do without her. Who would wipe her mouth? But Melissa replied that she would be fine so as not to disturb the silence during the meal. Melissa turned away from the maid and turned to the Duke with the words, "Right, Duke." By the clock in the back of her head, Melissa wondered where her little gray-haired friend, with whom she was of the same blood, was. He wasn't here. Had he finally died? Sun left, saying that there were people in danger, and that he had to protect them. The kid doesn't even know he has his own house. Tell him not to go back to Potterbrat Manor. Jake is her only heir. She can't do this. Yeah, he's the one, but he's always wandering around doing whatever he wants. Why do you like him so much? Oh, wait. The thing is, he's that bitch's son, right? In that case, your only daughter will be happy to leave you. She's here. Thinks he's dying here all alone. But I guess she was wrong. Melissa got up and left, and the Duke clutched his head with the words, "You little wretch." It wasn't fair to suffer the consequences of her horrible behavior in the past, because it wasn't all her doing. That's what she thought at first. But after some reflection, she realized that this life was pretty good. And for every day folding in college, she was obsessed with studying and studied very hard. Probably would have died of high blood pressure anyway if not for the accident. When she woke up, she realized she'd fallen into an affair, finally escaped from that hellish college life. His forehead was without a single wrinkle. Large, mustard gold-colored cat eyes. It looked just like the neighbor's dog. She can take it. Melissa doesn't die in the novel, so her ending isn't the worst. She just wants to lead a happy and peaceful life as the daughter of a duke. She's not going to play the role of villain. However, that doesn't mean she's going to show up and become a saint, although the male protagonist will definitely not be seduced. As long as she doesn't start crossing others, life as a militia is perfect. Melissa sits at her desk and writes something. "My dear Crown Prince, whom I sincerely care for." The recipient of this letter is none other than the Crown Prince of the Empire, Ian Basilios. "How are you, Your Highness?" writes Melissa in a letter. Even though it's the end of summer, the birds are still chirping happily, and the flowers are still sweetly scented. So, she would like to tell you something on this beautiful day, Melissa writes in a letter. Oops, that last word came out really pretty, she thought. And the last word was, "Please annul our engagement." Melissa loved Ian with all her heart too, so he's a big pain in the ass that needs to be gotten rid of pronto. I'm gonna write again because it's very important. Please annul our engagement. You put another man's name on the bouquet card. I don't want to know. Or I'm the lady my fiancé's been spending hot nights with lately. Besides, don't you hate me? Melissa wrote in the letter. Let's just break off the engagement. Because this is my 49th letter, and I don't want to waste any more paper on this. A maid came into the room when she heard all this, because Melissa was dictating the letter aloud. She thought she'd lost her mind. If you like our reputation and the aura of Duke Manor so much... Oops, she said. I think the last words were unnecessary in the letter. As Melissa read the letter again, she noticed that her handwriting was so beautiful, as befitted a duke's daughter. Well done. Melissa turned and saw the maid. She turned to her. Yona, if you are not so busy, could you carry and mail this letter? It needs to be delivered to the imperial palace. Tell them it's for the prince's heir. The maid took the letter and looked at it. She said, Oh, this is tiresome. This is the 100th time you have done this. Melissa said that if she didn't get an answer this time, she would pelt the prince with letters until she got her way. Melissa added that the maid should check the address to make sure it is correct. Geez, look at that. She definitely thinks I'm her mistress, Melissa thought. In any case, should she carefully choose an outfit for her meeting with Yuri? Melissa opened a book that had a selection of dresses and looked for a suitable dress. Perhaps the reason Melissa wrote this letter will be kept secret until the next chapter. What do we do? She's sick of it. How much longer can she take it? Always catching your lover with another woman. What a shitty situation. Her fiancé and crown prince of the empire, Ian Basilios, in the novel he despises and pushes her away. Until you meet the main character. Everyone goes their own way, under the guise of finding true love. The prince led a dissolute lifestyle and was constantly causing trouble. Ian was the ultimate scumbag until he ran into Yuri, which means this situation will happen again and again. Melissa walked into the room where she saw her lover and some girl. They were talking to each other, or rather flirting. Hey, ladies, are you teasing me? The prince asked. I don't even know. You're just a beast, replied the strange girl. The problem is she can't look at it without reflexes, because they're a couple. She kept on flirting. The prince said you'd turn any man into a beast. The animal was finally in its natural habitat, Melissa thought. His yellow eyes are only for decoration. He doesn't notice his fiancée watching it all. When I first heard about the behavior of the heir to the throne, I thought he was only capable of drunkenly walking home in the middle of the night. Who knew the main problem was his ability to seduce girls with sweet phrases. He learned it from erotic novels of the 80s. An example of one of the stories, Leave me alone, Chelsea, sounds, Please accept my heart, which will warm you like the sun. Chelsea, your words are so sweet. The girl who was with the prince noticed Melissa and asked Ian, Who is that lady? Is she your maid? Melissa thought, She's blind or dumb, not noticing the obvious. What maid could afford to wear a dress as luxurious as hers? The prince said, Don't worry about her. Melissa thought, You're already almost naked. What else is there to take off? Skin or something. Then very intimate things started happening in the room. Smack, smack. The militia is psychologically traumatized. The sounds of their saliva exchange defiling her ears. Wait, why is she putting up with all this? Thought Melissa. Let's remember everything that happened first. First of all, we're at the Crown Prince's Inn. Where did the Imperial Scion bring this unknown lady? Second, right now that creep is doing this kind of thing right in front of her. Third, she came here on his orders. The bastard said he had something to show her. Fourth, from Melis's recollection, this isn't the first time he's done this. To summarize, Ian Basilios is a jerk who doesn't deserve her angelic patience. Melissa turned to him. Your Highness. And he turned around. Ian, who always ignored her. Melissa thought she just asked, Isn't he a jerk by any chance? Of course he freaked out. The jerk was always showing off his mistresses to Melissa, and every time poor Melissa would go ballistic. She'd always attack these girls and pull their hair. Melissa never said anything to Ian. The real creep, though, was our Prince Charming, standing on the sidelines watching the whole thing. The prince turned to her and asked, Are you completely nuts? But our new heroine, Melissa, wasn't confused and said that's what she wanted to know. Is she crazy? Who in their right mind would call their fiancé to watch cheating? The fact that she didn't grab your head and smash it against the wall after what she saw already proves her adequacy. Of all the men in this novel, Ian was the one she hated the most. Given his shitty behavior, how could Melissa even fall for him? The prince became indignant. What do you mean grab his head? He knew Melissa had a bad temper, but he had no idea she would throw such cruel words in his face. Let me ask you, does he seriously think that making out with others in front of her is being honorable? Melissa thought, scratching her temple. Your Highness, she said. Would you like to hear some really tough words? She's noticed you're an excellent kisser. Let me help you demonstrate your skills on the parquet. After all, they're the perfect partners for a creep like you. Melissa noticed something was wrong with him. His lower lip has started to quiver, such a shocked expression on his face. He reminds her of a fawn. This guy had the guts to have an affair on the side, but he's flinching over 2 phrases. That's serious. Ian had always watched Melissa's violent behavior in silence because he had never had to be her victim himself. He must be dumbfounded that she's finally venting all her rage on him. Why doesn't he get what he deserves for once, puppy? Melissa said. Ever since she was reborn in this body, his fiancé was no longer a douche, you know? Melissa said, fine, in that case she'll just leave. Since you despise her so much, she doesn't see the point in getting married. What are we going to do if we get married? Play hand-to-hand in bed? That's probably what he envisioned. In fact, it wouldn't happen anytime soon. In the novel, Ian falls madly in love with Yuri and asks Melissa to part peacefully. His statement comes as a severe blow to the Duke's unfortunate daughter. A girl who loves with all her heart can't accept the breakup. She cries and whines and refuses to accept the prince's decision. However, Ian later quits the militia right in public, stomping its reputation into the dirt and ruining his life. But hell, she'd let it happen. What did little Potterbrat like about him that made her so resistant to the idea of letting him go? Crown Prince has no feelings for her and openly cheats on her. I don't see a single reason to cling to him. Obviously he puts on a show like this all the time for the sake of... So she'd be the first to talk about breaking off the engagement. In the end, the betrothal was just a political move. The prince hates Melissa. No matter how many times the heir talked her into separating, she didn't even want to hear about it. So now Melissa couldn't blame him for anything. Okay, it doesn't matter anymore. This asshole is going to meet Yuri in the near future. And as things stand, she'll give him the fucking breakup they both crave. Nothing bad will happen if she does it earlier in the novel, right? There will be no reason to mess with Yuri, so I won't meet a bad end. Especially since she's the Duke's daughter. What's stopping her? The annulment of the engagement to Ian will not prevent future marriages, and thinks it won't hurt her family too much. Which means that even if her fiancé, the Crown Prince, gets what he wants. Melissa repeated once more. Let's do it, do you want to? She finally told Ian what he had longed to hear. Now he could go home. And then Jeez shouted at the top of his voice that they couldn't break the engagement and pushed his lady he'd brought to the side. What's going on? The lady asked. Except for the prince, always behaving like a gentleman, and now changed. The prince was shocked himself, so stunned that he even pushed his fiancée. That reaction came as a surprise to Melissa. She asked why he thought they couldn't break off the engagement. The prince asked, Did anything happen to you by chance? Why so suddenly? The militia said, Isn't that what you've been working so hard to achieve with your behavior? Why were you showing her all those fascinating pornographic scenes of mistresses? Were you proposing a threesome? That with that look he was sincere. Now if she'd gotten it wrong and Ian hadn't expected to break up, what had awakened him to this mayhem? Maybe the plot has changed? Instead of Yuri meeting and falling in love with this girl who is now with him. No, this is crazy, it can't be, Melissa thought. Then why was he blushing? And at one point he shouted at once. His opinion is that he is against breaking the engagement. He doesn't want to, in which case you have a fetish. A cheating fetish? Melissa asked. The prince shouted, No, he has no such fetish. There's nothing wrong with him. Then maybe your little buddy only gets up when someone is watching, Melissa said. Why do you have that opinion of me? The prince asked. Melissa stopped screaming and thought. If none of those options fit, then he was just messing with her. He blushed again. Had she really hit the mark? After all, it was only he who wanted to produce Melissa. And she thought his actions and words had some hidden meaning. You chose a dirty way to do it. But you managed to hurt her to the core, Melissa said. Think about it. Her fiancé, whom she harbored such tender feelings for, made his fiancé watch another lady rub up against him. Yes, she's known as the devil of the house of Potterbrat. But her heart is also capable of pain. She had no decent words, so she remained silent, trying her best not to lose her composure. Ian, however, had nothing to say. After all that had been said, the awkward silence was broken only by the rustle of clothes being hastily pulled on by the embarrassed mistress. After her conversation with the prince, Melissa's memories, previously vague, had now taken on color and clarity. Judging from them, Ian's scandalous affairs with other women were justified by the bride's excessive cruelty and shallowness. Because of such an easygoing nature of the prince in question, Lady Potterbrat was constantly criticized by those around her. In fact, the whole thing was very painful for her. All the servants and maids discussed it constantly. After all, he had slept with someone else, not talked about it. And his wife should have taken better care of him. Even in Korea, everyone blamed the woman if her partner cheated on her. Naturally, a man will cheat if a girl isn't good enough. What did she think? The servants were talking. I'm sure male chauvinism is also strongly ingrained here, even though the culture is similar to the West. Masculine is still Vedism, a term used to describe masculine attitudes and practices in which men's affairs and interests are considered paramount, and women are presented as inferior, unworthy beings. The prince said, "But he has something to say. Wasn't she the first one to molest him? Always hanging on him, trying to feed him, even though he was perfectly capable of it. Coming over uninvited. She imagines how hard it was for him to put up with her, so that's why he's been quiet all this time, trying to play the victim." He thinks we're the same, Melissa thought. Look at that innocent face. Yes, she did annoy you, Your Highness, but she behaved like that, only because she loved you. Drinking tea together and occasionally cuddling. She thought that was normal for a couple in love. She apologizes if she made him uncomfortable. That asshole. But why is he nodding his head like a complete idiot? She'd never met anyone as ridiculous. God, her head's already ringing. But that doesn't mean he can sleep with everyone, Melissa said. How could he? How could he cheat right in front of her? So childish, it's unbearable. Are you guys doing a show called The 1001 Mocking of Stupid Melissa? When Melissa received an invitation from Ian, she was overjoyed that the prince was calling her to join him. She spent all day picking out an outfit, what she should wear to her prince's house tonight. Flushed with happiness, I did everything I could to look flawless. And each time, after much suffering, the girl saw the same picture. But even then, Melissa couldn't bring herself to ignore the prince's letters, because they were proof that he had thought of her, if only momentarily, and a timid hope warmed his heart. You've done all these negative things and still refuse to break our engagement, Melissa said. Did you really expect her not to want to break up? How can you be so sure? Melissa asked. The prince said, well, you've fallen in love with him, isn't it obvious? And then Melissa's eyes just exploded at his stupidity. She grabbed an ashtray that was nearby and hit the prince with all her might. But it was only her imagination. What a shame, Melissa thought, because she'd almost launched an ashtray at his head. Kant, help her, she stood thinking. Immanuel Kant, the originator of classical German philosophy exploring questions of rationalism. All philosophers who have speculated on the topic of conscious human behavior. She doesn't remember your names, but please help her. If she and what little common sense she still has left in her is correct, the crown prince cheating left and right all this time thinks it's perfectly normal to behave that way, simply because she still loves him. To quote the song, even if I'm with her, you'll only have eyes for me. He really thinks he's in one of Taeyang's songs. Think about it, Melissa said. She no longer had any feelings for him. But the prince didn't believe Melissa and said she was just mad. She said, no, it's serious. She doesn't love him one bit. Melissa noticed the look on his face. Ian looked like someone had told him that the earth was really flat. Must be because throughout her life Melissa has been crazy about him. Then this puppy is still convinced of her unconditional love. But things are different now, asshole. Come on, the prince said. Melissa replied, you know, feelings are unpredictable and can change. She means you and the lower part of your body, making love every night. Therefore assumed that the crown prince is an expert in such matters. But I guess I was wrong. Let's finally break the engagement, Melissa said. Or do you think we have any reason to continue the relationship, Your Highness? He really pissed her off. She just wants to get rid of her status as the prince's bride. I wonder if this jerk takes the throne, how quickly he'll bring the empire down, Melissa thought. The prince began to shout again. We can't break the engagement, and whirled his head around. You have to hand it to the prince. His looks are attractive, but looking at him now, she sees only a third-rate Casanova. In other words, any hint of understanding and sympathy in her soul was irretrievably gone. For all his arrogance, there are lines he shouldn't have crossed. The horror, how infuriating! Why can't we call off this damned engagement? Melissa screamed. Melissa got a headache this year and her blood pressure went up. While the couple was settling their relationship, the prince's mistress decided to make a quiet getaway. But it wasn't to be. She had a mishap. Her heel twisted and she fell, hitting her head on the table. The guards standing outside the door heard a rumbling noise and ran to the door. They asked, Your Highness, has something happened? The prince turned around and saw that his girlfriend named Linda had fallen. He asked, What the hell? The guards entered the room, approached the prince and asked, Are you all right? I asked them what was going on here. Lady Podabrate, you're at it again. Our patience is breaking, one of the guards said, grabbing her arm. Melissa couldn't understand what was going on. The clearly broken ashtray, her piercing screams, Ian's girlfriend sitting in tears on the floor, and the Emperor's offspring tired of going out to his bride. Considering how Melissa had behaved earlier, seeing this picture, they thought that what had happened was her fault. Melissa tried to explain to the guards that they just misunderstood everything and she hadn't done anything. Melissa saw a picture of the prince's girlfriend Linda throwing herself at him saying she was so scared, and the prince also threw himself at her with open arms saying, "Ah, Linda." He was sorry she had to go through this, he said, hugging Linda. When Melissa was taken, she said, "What beautiful acting. Everyone wants to make her out to be the villain. No one would even listen to her. It's useless to try to break free, only to hurt your neck and wrist." Come to think of it, the jerk never once apologized to her. She swears he's going to pay for everything. As she got into the carriage and drove to her home, Melissa reasoned the whole way. She would come to this decision, she thought after much deliberation. She swears it's not about a long-standing grudge, meaning even he had insulted her. The guards threw her out of the palace. A footman arrived and asked Melissa, "Are you back already?" She replied, "Yes," and the expression on the footman's face seemed to say, "She's gotten herself into trouble again, right?" The footman asked, "Do you need my help, lady?" Melissa said, "No thank you, I'm fine." She's still all sane, though, just thinking about what would happen if a guy like him ascended to the throne. Obviously, the empire will be reduced to rubble. He'll just destroy every aspect of society, and then he'll condescend to mere mortals and say, "You love him anyway, don't you?" And it's all going to cause absolute chaos. If he does change, it'll be after he meets Yuri. Oh wait, that's not going to work anyway. The prince has gone too far now, losing his last chance to redeem himself. Even Yuri won't accept him. On rare occasions, Ian was kind to Melissa, particularly at events they had to attend together. His forced smiles only added fuel to the fire of misunderstanding between them. That's how he assured the girl that he had feelings for her. How can she let that creep get close to the beautiful angel Yuri? So killing is the only option. Doesn't see any other option and won't look for it. Plus, she's a villain, so it shouldn't be something difficult for her. Great. The only thing left is to figure out where and how to hire someone, since her target is the heir prince. You have to be very careful. The carriage stopped, and they arrived home. Okay, Primly got down from the carriage and went to help open the door for the lady. When he opened the door, he heard, "Cut him to pieces, I beg your pardon," he asked the lady. Melissa sat and muttered to herself, "I'll chop off the head, no, cut it and so on. First tear off all 5 of his limbs, then throw the body in the ditch." Melissa didn't immediately notice the footman, but for a while he managed to overhear her muttering. She asked, "Oh, when did we get here?" Lucky stood, frankly horrified at what he had heard. He held out his hand to Melissa, and she said she hadn't realized they were already home, having arrived so quickly. When the footman offered his hand to Melissa, she touched her hand to his and felt her hand tremble. She couldn't understand why his hand was trembling. Lucky mumbled a little because he was afraid to speak, but still he gathered his strength and said, "She shouldn't maim people so recklessly." Melissa couldn't figure out who he was worried about, her or himself. "Okay, boy, not the one to suffer at her hand," she smiled to reassure the poor man. Lucky was very frightened. He said he had a wife and a rabbit. He loved them very much. "Please sit down. He's very sorry," he said. Melissa stood there, not understanding. On the ground and begged me to forgive him, but she just smiled. The whole thing went away. Melissa went back to her castle and decided to go see the Duke, knocking on the door. She asked, "Can I take a little of his time?" And so, she needs the advice of an experienced man, and he's the only one for the job. Duke Podebrat turned to Melissa, but he's so tall. She seems tall enough, but always has to raise her head while talking to see him. I feel like a dwarf. His stern and intimidating face looks exactly like Melissa's, but of all his qualities, the most striking is imperiousness. The Duke asked, "What does she want with him?" Fantasy novels based on the Middle Ages are dominated by the ideology of male chauvinism, similar to the sexist division in role-playing games, where the Hylers were always the female characters, and the warriors were always the male characters. In the world of her beloved king, the same prejudice. And Duke Ponebrath holds the most emphatic views. There are always reasons why some children grow up angry and resentful of life. He never looked at Melissa, his firstborn, second child and first son. The Duke allocated generously, lavishing attention and care, even allowed to receive education abroad. As a result, Melissa hated her father, and they stopped talking to each other, to the extent that their relationship had deteriorated. He turned and walked away, not continuing the conversation with his daughter. She thought he didn't hear or thought she was talking to someone else. He seems to be purposely ignoring her. Here comes the old man. Melissa yelled after him that she wasn't in the mood to be in the same room with him for long either. But she has a serious conversation to have. Could he spare some of his precious time? Duke turned around and asked, "What?" Melissa replied that she wouldn't drag it out and would get right to the point. She opened her mouth to say, "So that's how hers is." Duke interrupted and asked, "She wants to discuss everything here?" The Duke can't let them do it in the hallway. He'll have the drawing room ready for them. She should follow him. Melissa said there was no need. You can walk a long way and talk here. But the Duke went further. Melissa asked why. I mean, he's right, sure. But why would he go to all that trouble? She just wants to break off this stupid engagement, that's all. "And don't tell her," said Melissa, "that the Duke is going to get a glass of water to pour over his despicable daughter, like in all those doramas. Like," she stuttered about annulling her engagement to the Crown Prince. "Shit," she said. The Duke stopped and looked out from around the corner and said, "Give him minutes." But then abruptly changed the time to and said, "Come back here in minutes." Melissa wondered if he'd disappeared again, what he was up to. She wondered, before she kills that jerk of a prince, will the Duke sew her up? She was imagining things, but he'd invited her into the drawing room, just like the prince had. She got a bad feeling. Minutes passed. She knocked on the door. She was told to come in. Opening the door and peering into the room, she said, "Your lordship." And then she was stunned at what she saw. The room was decorated in lots of pink-colored balloons, stretchy lights, garlands, and there was a table with lots of different cakes on it. Melissa wondered what the chances were that this party was a surprise birthday party for another little brother he'd been hiding from her all these years. Melissa began to reason, what a nightmare of a family, with only 3 family members. It's not like she's the only one seeing this explosion at the unicorn factory with pink snot. Why is he so calm like that? Duke said, "First of all, sit down." He looked solemn, wearing a pink tailcoat. But this way his face looks 500% scarier. "Your ladyship," Melissa appealed. "You were struck by lightning while she was gone, right? You look very strange, even frightening." Melissa sat down and said, "Get to the point," the Duke said as he prepared tea and various sweets to go with it. "Help yourself, please." Melissa tried to speak again, but the Duke interrupted her. He had heard that this tea was very popular with the young ladies. Melissa realized he wasn't listening to her. Plus, the fact that he was brewing some kind of pink herb looked suspicious. Yeah, did he put poison in it or something? The maid poured a cup of tea for Melissa and said, "Help yourself, please." But Melissa noticed what the hell the Duke was drinking coffee, not tea. She reached for the cup, but she was shaking violently. Was she sure she could drink it, Melissa thought? She sat and reasoned that she looked suspicious, what she needed to do to keep from drinking it. Duke said, "Now, what was it you wanted to tell me?" It's been almost years since he's been able to communicate with her like this. Melissa said, "We have breakfast together every day and always greet each other." You forget, Duke. He wasn't even listening to her. She just wanted to have a normal conversation with him. Only she wanted to say she wanted to end the marriage. As the room was broken into, the guy asked, "What happened to this room?" The militia said she was getting hard of hearing, or his hand really had fallen off and he couldn't knock. The scantily clad jerk who blatantly ignored her question was Melissa's younger brother, Jake. Well. "Has the prodigal son deigned to come home?" Melissa said. "Along with being one of Yuri's lovers and heir to the duchy, the boy is also a professional imperial mercenary. Thanks to him, everyone who stood up against the ruling family died a mysterious death." "Melissa, what is the purpose of your worthless existence?" Jake said. Oh yeah, also in the novel Jake despised his sister Melissa. Anyway, this little bugger has earned a great reputation. Despite his young age, he has the best results in shooting and is good at sorcery. She doesn't know why, but Jake doesn't usually show his face at public events. And when he does come, he stands in the corner like an outcast, hiding behind his hood. This is a secretive asshole who doesn't like to show his face in public. When you go to his room, he's never home. He's always wandering around. She means, given his stunning good looks, realizes how much attention he can draw to himself. But there's gotta be a limit to how lucky he is with his genes. Melissa wasn't born with any special talents. Besides, he's much better looking than she is. No one would think they're related. And they're brother and sister. In the novel, Jake was a modest, cold-blooded, silent, handsome man. She had always liked this hero from the shadows, watching Yuri and hiding his feelings, but Melissa asked her father, "What does all this mean?" Jake said, "Why did you put ribbons on the ceiling? There are too many of them. Even a 5-year-old would cringe at the horror of it. And the tea alone and its smell, you could tell it was the cheapest thing you could buy. As cheap as you can buy," Jake said indignantly. "Please don't lose your dignity, father." Which is why Jake doesn't visit his father. Who knew he could go on a 10-word-a-second rant? A gunslinger, a magician, and a rapper. Just the man of dreams. His father told Jake, "If you want something, just say it and don't embarrass yourself." "You've always been like that, Dad." "He's sick of listening to his every word," Jake said. "But you never follow them just to see what you've done." Yeah, he'd told his dad a long time ago that Melissa was a kid. So if you didn't decorate the room with girly stuff, she'd throw a tantrum. "But that's not what I meant," Jake said. "Melissa figured it all out, so it's because of Jake this whole circus. He's even worse than the Crown Prince. Somewhere awesome Snow Queen from the novel. Melissa had envisioned a different image, and he's so far from it. She knew him to hate her sister and her own father. But this Jake is different. It's so shocking she feels like someone's hitting her over the head. Her gray-haired son wasn't like that at all. And Hertz is just kissing her son's ass too. Sits like a kid and listens to the asshole's sermons without complaint." "No, you gotta think positive," Melissa said. "Maybe he's a little chatty just with us in the family circle. But wouldn't that mean the brother's a douchebag? What kind of one-word answer isn't he here a minute ago giving out lines? Like a machine gun." Melissa asked her brother what he was doing here. "What's with the expression on his face?" "The asshole is silent and ignoring the molasses." "What a guy. He's got a nasty temper. He can't even talk properly." "He probably didn't clean his ears this morning," she asked. "Why come if it's nothing urgent? The door is there. She needs to talk to the Duke." She's hoping that Jake will take the hint to leave. Jake turned to his sister. "Hey, you. But she said it's respectful to address your favorite sister." "Ian," Jake said, and poked his sister with his finger. And why did he talk about the jerk thought Melissa should rack her brain? I think the novel mentioned something like that. Jake and Ian have been friends since childhood. A bond that helped cement their relationship with the Imperial family. So how they became enemies over a lawyer was described in an incredibly dramatic way. Ian told him everything. "Don't break off the engagement," Jake said. "Oh right, the asshole prince ratted her out to her brother. Oh, that's nice. What probably happened?" Jake went to see Ian, and he said something terrible had happened. Melissa asks for an annulment. What's he gonna do now? Well, Jake probably just said, "Well, nothing much happened. I wanted to get away like Ian." Jumped on him and said, Listen to me. Don't go. Come home and talk to your sister," he said. Jake apparently said, "You're on your own," but the man cried and begged. Melissa's willing to bet that's what happened. As she imagined this conversation and him bringing up that asshole again, it pissed her off. Wait a minute, let's say he came here at Ian's request. This version is the most plausible, especially if we remember that his murderous stare literally says, "What's she doing here?" Jake was looking for his father to relay Ian's request, so that's what happened. And of course, the townswoman told him where he was. He didn't have to spend half a day looking for his father. Hertzak would listen to his son, and since Melissa cannot disobey the will of the head of the house, then her plans to break up with the crown princess would be ruined. And now they were here together, so Hertzak would hear everything too. "Oh, you evil little jerk," Melissa said. "Yeah, who does he think he is? Who is he to tell her what to do? He should stay out of her relationship with her prince. Just leave it alone. Better keep quiet before she picks out her hair." That, Yanushka advised to treat his sister's head, and he came to fulfill his demands. "What are you, the crown prince's servant or something?" asked Melissa. They left him alone because of his teenage hang-ups, and he completely lost his bearings. Jack said he had his doubts, but he seems to see that she's really nuts. Melissa said she knew he didn't like her, but she didn't like him much either. Who likes him anyway? Melissa thought. I felt sorry for Jake, though, because they were of the same blood after all. He doesn't even show her the respect she deserves as an older sister. So now she doesn't think of him as a brother either. Especially when he stabs her in the back like a pathetic coward. She thinks he realizes that snitching on her to the Duke is despicable. "And also, your lordship." Melissa began to talk to the lunatic, yanking her foot and hitting the table, from which a cup of coffee spilled right onto the Duke's pants. She said, "Well, let's go." That's what I was going to say, but Jack beat me to it. She's going to break off her engagement to the prince. She can't stand him any longer. She doesn't ask her father for help, but if he gets in her way, he'll be sorry. Keep your possible displeasure to yourself. Now let me take my leave, Melissa said, turned around and walked away. I think she was a little more aggressive than she intended. Well, it'll all work out somehow. Maybe it's a nightmare. No, it's absolutely not. A nightmare, Melissa thought. She thought she needed to wake up and slapped herself on the cheek. But it didn't help. She was furious. Her cozy room has become a living hell. There are portraits of the prince on the right wall, and on the left wall too. Even on the ceiling. That jerk is everywhere, Melissa said. Jake's a graying fool. How dare he do such a thing? She shouldn't have provoked him. I wonder where he got all those portraits of the prince in different poses. Personal collection or something? Is it even legal to take so many portraits of a member of the ruling family? Plus, it looks like it's glued on with magic. You can't get it off. She tried. We have to leave quickly or her mental health will completely collapse. And then she saw a portrait on the wall. She stood up to look at it, and something clicked. She screamed. She seemed to fall out of reality for a moment. It took a long time to get out of there. I didn't expect that filth to be on the door. Jake, tonight you will join me in a passionate kiss with your fist. With eyes blazing, Melissa went in search of her brother, running. So all the maids almost fell in around her. She ran up to the well, but apparently he's an imperial assassin for a reason, because she never found him anywhere. Had he really left the estate? She thought. Pooped and ran away, you miserable coward. Melissa sends him an eternal incontinence curse. Seeing the maid, Melissa turned to her. Hey, has she seen Jake? It was the master who ordered me to give you his words if you ask. And then fled. Pass what on? Melissa asked. The maid replied, Don't thank me. Melissa pissed off with a fist into the wall with all her might. Your hand got in the wall too, cried out the maid, startled. Melissa repeated, You're welcome. He still thinks she's a fan of the prince, so he took all her actions as an attempt to get attention. She thought she would go crazy again at the sight of his image. Melissa started laughing. The maid was frightened by this laughter. It was like a madman. She asked, Are you ill? Shall I call the doctor? Melissa knows she looks strange in the eyes of the employees. However, her head is occupied with only one thought. They need to talk to her little brother, her fist already ready for a heart-to-heart talk. Jake, podabrate. He's going to be a meat chop tonight, Melissa said. Jake was sitting on the roof and he hears someone talking. He started to listen. Someone's coming. A light came on. This someone, a woman's voice, said that the servants were talking in the chimney. There was a rat. Well, who would have thought it? A window opens and Melissa's head pops out with the words, The white rat found you. Our poor Jake, really well hidden, she said. Jake asked how she had found it. Melissa replied how she found out about this place to tell him. For such a great sister, this is a simple matter. In fact, it was written about in the book Her Beloved. Right now they are near the chimney on the roof of the house. The servants only come up here for general cleaning. In addition, there is a flat floor and a wall to lean against, ideal for privacy. But there's one small drawback. If you fall, you'll be nothing but horns and legs. In the novel, the Jake who lives on the roof, often hiding here from his hated relatives, even called it his secret place, and once came here with Yuri for the scariest date of her life. Jake told Melissa to leave, but she said there was something she wanted to tell him first. He said, I'm listening to you. Melissa started to say how dare he turn her room and her nicest room into such a hell. Jack asked, What's wrong? I mean, she liked Ian. She shouted, Are you crazy? Then coughed and said, Actually, she doesn't like him. That's why he's going to break off the engagement. No kidding, seriously, Jake said, somehow faintly disbelieving. But her tastes were specific, Melissa said. However, she realized a lot of things as she watched him making out with the other ladies. Yeah, he's just a jerk. Jake said, Ha! Hey, you, what are you laughing at? Melissa asked. You're even more of a jerk for turning her bedroom into a country toilet. She swears she could smell it. Right now is not the time to laugh. Anyway, Jake, playing designer without her permission was a terrible mistake. Should have thought a few times before messing with her bedroom. Jake asked why he didn't understand. Oh, he's so annoying. She's going to freak out. Because it's a trivial matter of etiquette and morality, Melissa said. What's more, if he behaves in this manner, she's going to get very, very angry. Jack asked what was wrong with her. Why should he care? Melissa got angry again. She asked, How old is our little Jake? 2 years old or 3? He wondered why she was asking that. He is 17 years old. She laughed, for he still didn't understand what was wrong. Jack said he had no idea what she meant. Then Melissa said, Listen carefully. Okay, then let me put it this way. You touch her stuff again and you'll be scalpless. Deal? While the brother and sister were talking, a voice was heard saying to them, Madam and Master, what are you doing in such a dangerous place? There was some woman standing downstairs with a suitcase. This woman's name was Martha. She was raising Melissa and Jake. Last year she left as they both grew up. The nanny used to swear a lot, but the only one in the whole estate loved the Duke's daughter, Melissa. However, why is Martha suddenly back? Melissa thought strangely. Martha drew in her breath and yelled a quick, Come down! The kids immediately went back through the window to go downstairs before their babysitter scolded them at all. When they came down, and that Martha said, Why, she understands still, young master. But how could you, my lady, get up there? Turning to Melissa. Leaning over, she saw that Melissa's skirt was all wrinkled. The nanny shoved the children in the back and nudged them to go forward. But then she said, I'm sorry. I've only just arrived and I'm already telling you off. But our young master and young mistress are still acting like little children, she said. Especially you, young mistress. You must take care of yourself. You'll be married soon, won't you? What the hell is she not talking about? Melissa thought. Wait, what did you say? Martha repeated. Our young gentleman is getting married? It's obvious, she said. No need to be shy, she said to Melissa. I hear you've decided to announce the wedding at a reception to be held at the Imperial Palace, Martha said. Na's been her nanny since she was a little girl. As soon as she heard about it, she couldn't help but rush over. Melissa had no idea what was going on. What wedding? Sincere congratulations. I wish the baby's more family, Martha began to say sturdily. But Melissa's head was spinning. Plus, you'll be married to a much-loved prince. Your dream has come true, Martha said. A handsome man like that is a man you'd want to follow in fire and water. When Mistress was little, she said she was sure to be a princess one day. It's been years, Mistress. Already a bride. It seems like yesterday. How quickly time flies, Martha said and cried. Martha is so happy for Melissa that it makes you want to cry. But Melissa isn't thrilled. She clutched her head because she couldn't remember what was supposed to happen next. And then at one point Melissa fainted. Martha was very frightened, screaming, Good God, Mistress! Martha thought Melissa had fainted from joy. All the servants came running. One said, Send a doctor! The other, Mistress, are you all right? Since she lost consciousness due to the violent shock, Melissa was carried into a room, and she lay there for some time. Her governess Jonah was always by her side. Jonah walked over and said, Mistress, I know you are already awake. Melissa opened her eyes, and so she lay passed out for half a day. She asked, How did you know I was awake, Iona? The maid replied, She has her ways. How infuriating and annoying the thought of the prince beating Melissa. She turned on her side and said she just wanted to lie in that soft bed and not think about anything. Come to think of it, Melissa was constantly harassing Jonah with her demands to get married the following spring. They should have a wedding in the season of love, Melissa shouted. If it were Melissa who could go back in time, then she would have grabbed that Melissa by the throat and said, Stop begging him for it! However, because of her reckless behavior and stubbornness, Lady Melissa has what she has. Now she's reaping the shitty fruits of her labors. But it's the other thing that annoys her the most. Before, Ian had simply brushed off his chastity's inquiries. And now you've changed. Why not announce the wedding at the reception? You wanted it so much, and insists on not living our marriage. In the plot of the novel, he wouldn't even ask his bride to the ball. He would probably come with someone else. Now that she has demanded that the engagement be annulled, the prince expects things to get better if he announces the marriage in front of all the guests. He's decided to throw a ball. Didn't put her on notice, writing her off easily. I'm sure Yanushka planned to tell the Duke and spread the rumors without her knowledge. Jonah, where is father now? She asked the maid. She needed to find him. The maid replied that his lordship had left a short time ago, saying that he had to settle affairs in one of the provinces. You didn't know? The maid said. How would Melissa know? What the heck, he ran away. By the way, she heard something, said the maid. But it's not so important, they say. His Highness is buying up all the expensive clothes and jewelry in the capital's salons. He also said his bride should be the prettiest at the ball. Does the jerk have amnesia and forget everything? Melissa thought. What an asshole. She is the daughter of a duke, a noble lady who also has power. He thinks she can't buy her own clothes. Ian doesn't consider Melissa's opinion. One day she's bound to kill him. But there's no time to think about this abomination now. She must find a solution to the main problem. It's useless to shut up the rumor monger. Surely the whole empire is already aware of what's going on. His Highness, the Crown Prince, is going to announce his marriage at the ball, said one of the gawkers. And everyone else is saying, we must attend the ball immediately. Oh, and who'd believe the Hellcat who'd been dragging around the Imperial Scion for so many years could break off the engagement before the reception, Melissa thought. No, annulling an engagement between nobles requires the consent of both parties. It's very complicated. Hereditary asshole. He won't give in. All we have to do is beat him until he gives in. I wonder if there isn't another way, she thought. Surely it's possible to just skip a point. It's the easiest way, isn't it? After all, the idea of skipping the prom isn't such a bad idea after all, but it is organized by the ruling family. In the Basilios Empire, 2 balls are held annually, one in the spring and one in the fall. Since this is a large-scale event, nobles and even some commoners can afford to purchase an invitation. This is not an event that she, the prince's bride and daughter of the duke, can easily miss. Thanks to Ian, everyone expects them to announce the wedding. If she doesn't show up, he will be publicly humiliated. She's already looking forward to his embarrassment. What a wonderful plan. Lying in bed, she turned to her maid Jonah. Yes, mistress, she replied. Break her legs so that she cannot dance at the ball. You will have to refuse, said the maid. Then open all the windows and prepare an ice bath for her. Even if you catch a cold, you still have to attend the ball, the maid said. Melissa said she just wanted to jump out the window, but the maid said, Why? Don't just kill your fiancé. Melissa jumped out of bed. Maid Jonah always listens to her tirades and responds with frightening calmness every time. Damn, now she's even more eager to swat Ian. Melissa simply has no other choice. Who in their right mind would take out a prince? Unless she starts walking around like a crazy person with a flower in her hair. Or I won't beat the asshole, and in front of everyone I'll be a toy in his hands. Either way, she can't miss the point. I can't believe how much it pisses her off. Why does she have to put up with all this because of some jerk? Melissa started freaking out and pounding her pillow with her fists, screaming that she didn't want to go to that stupid ball. She really didn't want to go, and she was going to kill that asshole. The appointment is 2 weeks away, so what should she do? The maid asked what she could do, and Melissa replied, spread a dirty rumor about the principal for the principal among the guests. But first things first. Since she has to go, it's worth picking out a package. That's when she realized she'd wear the ugliest dress. The worst dress in the world. Something that looked like garbage. Because she was too busy thinking about destroying Ian, she had completely forgotten about one important event of the spring ball. She told her maid we were going for rags. When she got to the store, she started looking for the right dress, pointing out to the saleswoman that, no, it's too elegant and pretty. What is it anyway? Do you think she would wear? Something so festive and extravagant. Melissa, the saleswoman said, giving her the ugliest dress. Why do you only have cute and high-quality outfits here? Ah, she'll just take the bag and make holes in it for arms and legs. Brilliant idea, Melissa said. The maid asked calmly, Mistress, do you really seriously want to appear in this? Usually girls hire the best seamstresses or buy ready-made dresses from salons a month before the festivities, the maid said. That's what makes this ball different from others. Someone goes to further countries for unique styles and fabrics, the maid added. Some people wear family heirlooms that have been passed down, like, wow, so that's the dress Grandma got married in. It looks like the moon prism gave her power, and she felt powerful, the maid continued. There are even those who fight over such things, the maid concluded her tale. The spring ball was a much-anticipated event for many, but it's a great opportunity for her to kick the prince's ass, Melissa thought. Think about it. The prince doesn't like Melissa anyway, so if she comes to the ball looking like that, he'll be so annoyed he won't mention it in his life, or their wedding at all, Melissa concluded. Your reputation will fall below the plinth, mistress, and still come to this ball, the maid said. Melissa replied that her reputation was already at rock bottom, and she had nowhere else to fall. Walking into the room, Jake said, God, there's no limit to how low a man can sink. What the hell were you doing following me all the way to the fashion house? Said Melissa. Decided to help your sister pick out a dress, or wanted to pick out a pair of skirts for yourself? And don't tell me you just love her so much or I'll count my teeth, Melissa whispered. Melissa tries to provoke Jake as to how he will react. The story continues. You really think he came all this way just because he wanted to? Said Jake. Okay, Melissa said. Obviously live that Yanushka told you to do something like that. Fox, decided to Sparadize. Or did he tell you, keep an eye on your sister so she doesn't make a mess? Oh no, you're probably just another prince's dog. Thank you, you can go now. Melissa reached for the dress, pulled it out and held it up to her. It was hideous, but she said, "Doesn't it look gorgeous on me?" Jake, when he saw the dress, said it looked lousy. Shut your mouth, Jake, you weren't given your word. What I want is my choice, Melissa said. Jonah, tell the gray-haired man to get out if he has any more brains, Melissa told the maid. Mistress Melissa asked you to get off, the maid said. But Jake wasn't about to leave. He said, "No more, he'll stay and watch." Then tell him to put on that nauseating dress and marry Ian, Melissa said. Mistress says you must marry, repeated the maid. When the altercation was over, Melissa told her maid they were coming, and off they went. I'm down the street. Melissa was enjoying the bright warm sunshine. It shone and radiated warmth and kindness. Melissa was upset that the weather was so beautiful and she was stuck here. Pick one stupid dress, hating herself for it. The maid said, Mistress, do you realize that the ball is already next week? You should have purchased an outfit a long time ago. We're limited on time. Let's pick some. Yes, let's go. Melissa thought she knew it herself, but she didn't want to pursue it. The bottom line is that she has a disgusting sense of style, and her social skills are even worse. Case in point, Lady Melissa. You are so beautiful when you just smile. She doesn't even know how to hold a basic conversation, and telling someone like her to get ready for the ball, to demand the impossible. She also hadn't figured out how to get rid of the prince at the ball, how to kick his ass. The situation is total crap, Melissa said, but the weather is really great. Melissa hates the ballroom, and she really hopes it burns to the ground. As I walked down the street, she spotted something and asked the maid what it was. What are you talking about? What is it this time? The maid asked. Melissa said, her eyes not deceiving her. Over there, look. What's lying around? I don't know what it could be, said the maid. She doesn't actually care anymore. Pick out a dress at last and let's go. But Melissa says there's something lying around. We'll have to take a look. Melissa decided to get closer, but the maid yells to her. Come back, Mistress Melissa! Don't get so close to him! There was a disgusting odor coming from the man. Melissa thought, is he dead? His hair is in a terrible state and his body is so thin, skin and bones. He's very emaciated. Should I give him money? She thought. And then a brilliant idea popped into her head. A simple and most effective way to get rid of the mean jerk. Melissa reached out to the man and said, Hi there. Why are you lying here? Do you want to eat? I can help you. The maid said, Ma'am, I told you not to pick up everything from the floor. Ian, just wait. You're in for a huge surprise. She imagined how it would look. Now she'd give him her hand, and everyone around her would see that Melissa had picked up a bum, and the gossip would start. Surely at the ball many girls will be paying the prince signs of attention. Well, compared to all those lovely women in the arms of a prince, the man across from me is not the least bit inferior to them in charm. On the contrary, it's the most beautiful of all. It's simply divine. My eyes can't see. I want to see it, but I can't. Haha, everything is going according to plan, Melissa said. Anyway, looking at her new friend, she said, Buddy, help. Now you're hers too. She washed his hair with Jake's shampoo, and his hair became very fine. One of the perks of her rebirth into Melissa's body is that there are more opportunities to face the pretty boys. First was her stunning fiancé, the crown prince. Then came her brother, also blessed by Apollo. Even the servants working on the estate are very attractive. Consequently, she developed the ability to recognize a diamond among the dirt. She realized this when she saw the homeless man lying on the ground. No matter how half-dead he is, innate beauty cannot be hidden. Besides, she needed a good-looking partner exclusively, if she wanted to take down Ian. So she grabbed his arm and led the drifter home. Madam, are you out of your mind? How come you bought a homeless man instead of a dress? The maid asked. Melissa walked over to the maid and told her in her ear what the double bonus actually was, and the maid immediately began to speak fully. You have my support. How could she even stop? Her when Melissa wanted to help a person in trouble. You are the perfect example of a noble lady. The maid walked on and kept saying she was touched by her kindness. Incredibly impressed. His lordship will be delighted. The maid will do her best to help mistress. Ion is the most calculating and greedy man she has ever met in her 2 lives. They all walked up to the carriage. Melissa said, Let's go. The maid asked quickly, getting into the carriage. Melissa said, Get us as soon as possible to Potebrate Manor. The footman said, Yes, mistress. As they drove out, It seemed to Melissa that they had forgotten someone or left something behind. What they forgot or left behind was her brother Jake. He wasn't himself with rage. He'd lost her and couldn't figure out where she'd gone. Fortunately, the estate had been empty since the Duke had left on business. He didn't run away. He just had to leave to settle matters in one of the provinces. So they arrived, Melissa, Bomjik, and her maid, and quickly snuck in through the backyard. And so they set the plan in motion. She began to tell her maid what she was to do, to draw water for the bath in her chambers. The maid asked, "Mistress, will you rub a stranger's back yourself?" And then Melissa thought about it. Touching a naked stranger was creepy. Melissa said the man was old enough to take care of himself. Tell him where to get what he needs, and he can take it from there. So while she waited for him, I decided to once again remember the pattern of action. Why do I need to do? I have to think Ian used the affair to piss Melissa off, but no one is stopping her from making out with others either. And cheating would make me as bad as the prince. However, unlike the prince, she won't drool over someone she doesn't like. Just a little bit of surprise and a pinch of imagination, and we get a sense of Ian's loss or jealousy. She's not interested. She just wants everyone at the ball to be rendered speechless by what's happening. No one could have imagined that his bride was clingy. She's coming to the ball with another godlike man. He is not her kinsman or nobleman. She'll want to make the prince jealous, or the man is just her plaything. There'll be gossip between people. Due to various misconceptions and speculations, Ian will find himself in an unpleasant situation. That's what she wants. She doesn't have to worry about gossip. Let everyone whisper all she wants. She's got a reputation in high society for being at the bottom anyway. Besides, she wasn't going to have any kind of active social life or fight for power and influence. Just eager to show everyone that Melissa Podobrat is not another empty-headed dog Ina. She wants the new guy to come to the ball as her date. Of course he can refuse, and she won't force him because I'm not helping because I expect something in return. But if you agree, she will reward him generously. You don't even have to learn etiquette, just stand by him. The guy with the blue hair gave his consent. Melissa clarified that yes, that was exactly what he was required to do. Just stand there and smile. There, I lost my temper and didn't realize I was laughing out loud, Melissa thought. By the way, we never introduced ourselves correctly. What's your name? Where do you come from? Asked Melissa to the guy with blue hair. You and I are business partners now, so we should know at least that much about each other. But the guy was very nervous and stood silent, saying nothing. Militia, come on! What's your name? Where are you from? Damn it, I made a mistake, Melissa thought. How can she ask his name when he doesn't even have a tongue? A maid came running in with a leaf and a quill and said, Madam, she has a solution to the problem. Yes, you may not thank me. I am the maid here after all, Iana said. The boy took a leaf and a pen and wrote, What's his name? His name is Nain. Melissa understood. She would be more careful from now on. Nain's doing something again? Writing again. Melissa stands diligently waiting. He was a worthless homeless beggar. He's so grateful to her for the chance to start his life over. When Melissa read the story he wrote, she thought she was using this innocent lamb, felt like the ultimate fool. Melissa suggested we go out to eat first, and then continue the conversation. A good table with many dishes was set for Melissa and Nain. Nain ate with great appetite. When they had eaten, they went back to the room. Just a few minutes later, a maid knocked on the door and said, Madam, the prince has come to see you off. Melissa replied that she couldn't believe he'd been so attentive and courteous after she'd asked to terminate. No, it's up the long-awaited day X that Melissa has been waiting for. Now it was her time to shine, to be the best of all. They managed to get Nain dressed up in the meantime, and walked together. Melissa remarked that Nain was cool. Who would have him? Such an angel. Her plan is so desperate and reckless, surely she would have a heart attack. If anything goes wrong, she could be accused of insulting the ruling family, for she would dare to humiliate the prince. Honestly, she felt a little ashamed to take advantage of the young man's naivete, but anyone would get cocky with a situation like this. Nain, trust me, Melissa said. Just think I'm giving you a boat ride. Melissa winked and said, You believe me, don't you? Since Nain couldn't tell her, he just nodded to her. They all went down together to the carriage. Downstairs the maid said, Thank you for your expectations, your sympathy. Lady Melissa has arrived. What is it? The prince got out of the carriage and saw that Melissa was not alone. Of course, the prince is as beautiful as ever, she thought. But her companion was even more beautiful. Wait, she said. He didn't even notice her. She took it and coughed. And just then the prince saw Melissa with the words, "Melissa, are you here yet?" Melissa replied, "Yes, we're already here." The prince smiled a strained smile. "Just look at that face," Melissa said. "So, are you surprised?" "I didn't think you would come here in person." "She is very honored, Your Highness," Melissa said. The prince laughed and said, "Yes, that's right. I did come." The prince asked, "And who is that gentleman next to Melissa?" and pointed his finger at him. "Ah, him, you needn't worry about him," she said. "Just my partner in the ball," and clung to him as best she could. The prince asked, "Partner?" His face was surprised. "You're kidding, right?" the prince asked. "We were supposed to go to the ball together, weren't we?" Melissa replied, "It's not a prank. You never intended for her to become your companion. She thought you'd say no this time too, so she found another suitor." The prince said he didn't mean that. "You can invite one of your favorites,"